Okay, hello everyone. Warmly welcome. My name is Kata Tamás, and the other leader of this event is Daniel Stoll. We are the founders of ISTDP Hungary. And this event is the sixth in the row where we invite clinicians from all around the world to teach us short dynamic psychotherapy with video-based teachings of this, because I think I'm not the only one who found these resources quite scarce in Hungary. So now that we have the possibility to improve this situation, we would like to do our best to organize these events. Of course, ISTDP Hungary has other activities as well, like translating books, attending conferences, writing articles, and also cooperating colleagues in other countries. As far as our schedule today, first, Danny will give you some important technical information about this workshop. And after the presentation, in the last 5 minutes or so, so before 8 p.m., we would like to announce two important future events of us. So, Danny, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Kata. And welcome to all participants. My name is Daniel Stoll. I am the organizer of today's events. It is good to see so many familiar faces again, and perhaps it is also a testimony that something interesting and constructive is happening here in these gatherings and presentations. In addition to the Hungarian professional community, we would like to address a special welcome to the members of the international community as well, who are honoring us with their presence today. It is a pleasure to share this event with you as well. A few words about the framework of today's presentation. As you all know, audio and video recording of the lectures are prohibited. So please take this very seriously, as it is with professional confidence that we have the opportunity to discuss these video recordings. There will be no breaks, but feel free to take a biology break anytime and return to the meeting. Also, you can ask questions during the presentation. You can use the raise hand function, or also you can write in the chat your questions. And if you need any help with translation, we would be grateful to help you guys. So there is a new feature in Zoom, the auto translate caption function, which is working pretty fine, and you may turn it on right now. If you have got any technical issues, please visit the tech help support on the Zoom's website, or you can direct message us as well. And after the presentation, please stay with us, as we would like to draw your attention to two important upcoming events. So thank you and enjoy this event. Kata, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So our topic today is the Therapeutic Alliance from an ISTDP viewpoint. And it's a huge pleasure for me to introduce our presenter today, who is a clinical psychologist from San Diego. He is Matthew Jarvinen. So Matt, thank you again for accepting our invitation and being here with us. And will you be so kind and introduce yourself and deliver your presentation?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kata, for letting me join. Danny, thank you so much for the invitation. And hello, ISTDP Hungary. It's fantastic to meet another community of ISTDP learners. My colleague Tammy Chalu and I have a group called ISTDP San Diego that began as a local group. And then when COVID hit, we went online, and it's become kind of more of an international community. But it's great that you have so many people Hungary specific that can learn together and support each other in learning this sometimes difficult method. So it's great to be here. It's lovely to meet you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your responses and reactions. I'll have many questions that I'll be asking you as an audience. And it's really helpful for me as a presenter to hear any questions that you have as I'm going through the presentation, so that I know what's landing, what's not making sense. So as Danny said, please feel free to raise your hand. I'll also be monitoring the chat, and so feel free to put questions or comments in the chat along the way, so that we can make sure that nothing's confusing as we move forward. And if I need to slow down or anything like that to kind of help with some of the English translation, then that's absolutely fine. Just let me know. And if you have a question in Hungarian and you're not sure how to ask it in English, please just go ahead and ask away, and we can translate that for you, or put it in the chat as well. That's another great way to go about it. Okay, so just I can go into the presentation here, but as I said, yeah, I run a community called ISTDP San Diego. I also am on the board of the International Experiential Dynamic Therapy Association, which is the international group for ISTDP. And currently I'm the co-chair of membership. So I kind of oversee membership in terms of that community. So if you want to join, we would love to have you join. We have a very helpful listserv, if you aren't familiar with that, where people are asking questions about ISTDP and related therapies, and using it for referrals and resources. It's a wonderful resource. So we can put that information either into the chat or send it to you afterwards, because that's a lovely way to continue your learning and get connections with other people. Okay, so I'll go ahead and pull up the presentation, and we can get started. All right, can you see that, everyone? Okay, great. Let me just make sure I can get the chat here too, so I can, okay, great. Okay, so the topic of today's presentation is really enhancing the working alliance with ISTDP. That ISTDP has some very specific ways of supporting and enhancing the working alliance, or in other words, the therapeutic alliance. So regardless of your therapeutic orientation, it's my understanding that some of you are familiar with ISTDP, and yet many of you are working from different orientations. So I'm not here to kind of tell you that you have to switch to ISTDP, but I hope to give you some resources, some ISTDP-based resources that can help improve your working alliance and improve the focus of your treatment, no matter what modality that you use. Okay, so in terms of the psychotherapy research literature, what we see is that 50% of patients overall leave therapy before receiving a full benefit. And if patients don't improve within the first 7 sessions, they likely won't. So why is this? Why don't patients improve? Well, the patients that don't improve often don't form a strong working or therapeutic alliance, which research has shown is the single greatest factor in improving patient satisfaction, improving effectiveness, and decreasing dropouts. So in this training, we're going to help you learn and recognize the main barriers to the formation of a therapeutic alliance, as well as addressing specific ways of establishing and strengthening the therapeutic alliance. Okay, and as I said, that yeah, you'll be able to use this no matter what modality you're working in, as a way to identify where you're getting stuck with certain patients and how you can get the therapy back on track. ISTDP is a fantastic therapy, and I'll go into a little bit about some of the basics and the background. But sometimes when you're working in this kind of way, it can leave you vulnerable to specific issues when it comes to the working alliance. So I'll go into some of those factors as well, in terms of what ISTDP specifically needs to do in order to maintain a strong working alliance, while also doing other interventions that can especially be beneficial. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you this video here. And you can tell me if this sounds familiar to you at all as therapists. Okay.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's gonna stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever gonna stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Okay, so yeah, do you ever feel that way, as if, okay, you're seeing what's happening with your patients, you're seeing the problem, but you don't feel like you can work with them in a clear way to address the problem. And either they can't see the problem, they don't want to see the problem, or maybe they do see the problem, but they don't want you to help them with it. Right. And then we can be really frustrated at times as therapists, feeling like, oh, we just have to sit here and listen. Right. And that's our job, to just empathize, which certainly that's one aspect of it. But ultimately, our patients are here to get help with their difficulties, to get the nail out of their head. And that until we can really work together and establish a relationship where we're getting clear on what the problems are and how to overcome them, then yeah, it's not going to do them much good. Right. So just wanted to show that to you as a way of showing, yeah, this is what can happen when we don't have a strong working alliance. And then this is how we can sometimes feel as therapists, right, when when we feel powerless to actually address the issues that are there. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so how can we do that? How can we help patients see the nail in their head? How can we help them to know that the nail is actually causing the headache, causing the sweaters to be snagged, causing them to have the difficulties that they have? How can we do that? So when looking at common measures of the working alliance, what we see is that there are particular things that tend to get focused on in terms of measuring whether you have a strong working alliance. Okay, and some of these questions, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but is my therapist and I working towards mutually agreed upon goals? Okay, do I feel that we agree on what is important for me to work on? Okay, so these are some of the, we've established a good understanding of the kind of changes that would be good for me. Okay, so if a patient rates these questions highly, then it tells, okay, they have a good working alliance. Here's another measure that sometimes evaluates the working alliance. Do I feel heard, understood, and respected? Are we working on what I wanted to work on and talk about? Is the therapist's approach a good fit for me and what I'm wanting to address? Okay, so these are kind of some of the questions, some of the responses that patients will give when they're rating a working alliance highly. So when we look into the specifics and we boil things down, these are the main 4 aspects of the working alliance. And we're going to be coming back to this time and time again during the course of this presentation to be able to see, okay, are we getting agreement on the problems and goals with our patients? Are we getting agreement on the causes of those problems and the barriers to progress? Do we have agreement on the therapeutic tasks in terms of what we're doing with the sessions in order to address those causes and barriers? And do we have agreement on the roles that patients and therapists play in engaging with those tasks? If we do have agreement across all four of those levels, then we're going to have a really strong working alliance. The patients are going to be more satisfied with the treatments, and treatments are going to improve in terms of the clinical outcomes. But if we don't have these problems, we can get, or these aspects of the working alliance, we can get into problems, we can get into issues with patients not improving, we can get into misalliance, we can have therapeutic ruptures, or we can just sit there frustrated with the patient while they don't improve, feeling like the guy in the video who just has to listen while the patient drones on and on about their difficulties. So we really want to be able to enhance each of these four aspects of the working alliance, and I'm going to show you today how ISTDP specifically does that. Okay, all right. So just a brief comment. It sounds like some of you have familiarity with ISTDP, others of you don't. So just a brief summary of ISTDP. And just by a show of hands really quick, how many people have heard of or been to a training in ISTDP? Can you raise your hands just so I can see? Okay, great. Okay, great. Yeah, so a number of you, and yet, yeah, many people brand new to this. So I'll give some of a summary. Thank you in the chat, Bhavna. Great to see you again. And yeah, feel free to always put comments in the chat as well, because I'm monitoring that as well. Okay, so yeah, just a really quick summary. ISTDP, it's a brief form of therapy. It's focused on emotional distress, trying to promote personal growth. It emphasizes the importance of the therapeutic relationship and using the therapeutic relationship to foster emotional breakthroughs and overcoming defenses. So in that sense, it's a psychodynamic treatment, but it tends to be fairly structured in its approach. And it focuses really on immediate emotional experiences, trying to get patients to confront and re-experience feelings that have been suppressed in order to achieve insight, relief, and lasting change. And that sometimes this process can occur in a fairly short amount of time when you can identify and overcome defenses and deepen the therapeutic process, especially for patients who tend to be treatment resistant. So there's a lot of research that indicates that ISTDP can be helpful in situations with treatment resistance. So treatment resistant depression, treatment resistant bipolar, some of these other conditions, ISTDP is shown to be effective in areas where other therapies aren't. And I think if it's still the case, I think in England, first line of treatment for the health service in England is cognitive behavioral therapy. But for those who don't benefit, for the about 50% who don't improve, then the second line of treatment is ISTDP. So a brief just background on the research base. It's probably the most, if not one of the most psychodynamically researched treatments. So in terms of empirical support, there's a great deal of support for common mental disorders, for the benefit of those, for depression, anxiety, somatic symptoms, personality disorders, across a broad range of what most people see in their clinical practices. There's actually 25 published studies just on the cost effectiveness of ISTDP alone. So for those of you working in health services and hospitals, this is often something that can really help reduce costs for those larger organizations. And that's medication use, hospital visits, emergency room visits, et cetera. There's good evidence for, as I said, research for treatment-resistant conditions. There's 36 published studies, including 16 randomized clinical trials, just for those populations alone. And there's good evidence for long-term effects. So what we see with ISTDP is often people improve even after treatment. They continue to improve. So whereas some other treatments, they might get better in a similar kind of way during treatment, post-treatment, you often have a regression in terms of people's improvements. And with ISTDP, we often see improvement and then even more improvement on follow-up, even without ongoing therapy past treatment. So that's another very interesting thing about this approach. If you want more research on this, I recommend this link here, Reaching Through Resistance. This is Alan Abbas's website. He has a ton of research that he's done himself, as well as collaborating with other colleagues. So if you'd like more information about the research base of ISTDP, I recommend going to that site. One of the things you'll find there is this is the latest meta-analysis, kind of umbrella review, actually, of a number of meta-analyses that go into the effectiveness. This was the latest one in 2023, so feel free to look at that website for more information if you'd like. And how they summarize it as psychodynamic psychotherapy overall. It includes some of those treatments as well. But it's really a focus on identification of recurring patterns relating to self and others, focusing on the therapeutic relationship and the experience and expression of emotion. So that's very similar to what ISTDP specifically focuses on. Okay. So any questions, just kind of overview of ISTDP? I'm going to get into more specifics, but any questions just on the background overview before we get into the next pieces of the presentation? Okay. If there are, feel free to put it in the chat and we can kind of address it along the way. Okay, so coming back to this, we're going to start with focusing on the first piece, getting agreement on the problems and goals. All right. So I'm going to ask you, if you imagine yourselves, right, we're going to kind of go through a therapeutic journey here together. So I want you all to imagine yourselves, right, walking into your office. A new patient walks in, right? You sit down with them for the first time. Now, what might you say if you want to establish a good working alliance? How might you start to get the therapy started on the right foot? Because oftentimes, depending on how you start the session, you might immediately send it down a trajectory that will either help you with the therapeutic alliance or will work against it. And often what we'll see and show here is that patients are beginning to use their defenses from the very beginning of meeting you. And so unless you can address that right away, oftentimes the patient's defenses will take you, right, any number of places and you won't have as good of an alliance. So yeah, what might you say? What might be the first thing that you say? And I encourage you all actually to use the chat. You can also raise your hand for this and say it verbally, but I encourage you to use the chat just so many people can respond all at the same time. Yeah, but if anyone would like to raise their hand and respond too, that's fine. There'll be a number of questions like this, so we'll get used to it. Yeah, so what might you say? Yeah, you want to establish a good working alliance, right? Which specifically means getting agreement on problems and goals. So yeah, what might you say? Yeah, doesn't have to be the right answer, right? Could be anything. We'll just throw a few out and just kind of see, okay, what kind of answers might we get? Great. So in the chat, Danielle says, yeah, what brings you in to see me today? Great. What brought you here today and how do you think I can help with that? From Georgina, thank you. Yeah. Very first thing is asking, how is she doing? Was it difficult to find the place? Was there heavy traffic? So good. Yeah. So this is kind of establishing rapport, just kind of connecting with the patient. That's an important element of things. The only difficulty with that is if you start that way, then the patient might get used to just chatting with you and might not focus right away on their difficulties. So that's just something that you could keep aware of. Nora, could you please help me understand what made you decide to seek therapeutic support? Okay, great. Yeah, can you help me know how you're hoping that I can help you today? Right? What kind of support are you seeking out of therapy? Right? That's a great way to ask it. Cecily, what's the inner emotional problem you want me to help you with? Great, focusing on the internal difficulties. And tell me about yourself. Okay, great. So yeah, focusing really in ISTDP is we focus on specifically, here's some other examples of how you could do it. We really focus on internal difficulties. So ISTDP is really an internal, intrapsychic kind of focused treatment. We're focusing on what's happening inside the patient that's creating their difficulties. Sure, there might be external factors, but we're really focusing on the internal. And so that's where we're getting the question here from Cecily. What is the inner emotional problem that you want me to help you with? That's really a precise way of asking it. Other questions like, yeah, tell me about yourself. Again, that might be something, a way that you establish rapport. That might be a way that you kind of get towards it. But then a patient might tell you kind of any number of things, and they might not specifically give you an answer that's going to help you focus on an internal problem. So you might start that way, but then you might need to shift fairly quickly into, okay, yeah, and before you tell me any more, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what's the difficulty that you're wanting me to help you with here today. And so early on, as soon as you can, we want to be asking that so that we can get the information that we need, and so that then we can start thinking and conceptualizing about what the treatment might need to do and where the patient might need to go. Okay, so these are some of the different ways that you can ask it. And I put here at the bottom kind of, yeah, what's the internal emotional problem you'd like me to help you with today? That's often the specific way of doing it. Okay, so now what type of responses might you get? I'm sure you've asked this question before in your practices. Yeah, what would you like me to help you with? What kind of responses might you get? And then let's be thinking together, what's the optimal response that you're looking for? What kind of response would you get that would tell you, okay, the therapy's moving in the right track towards a good working alliance? Okay, so again, feel free, just like you did before, put some responses in the chat, or yeah, you can raise your hand as well. When you ask, yeah, what's the difficulty that you're here to address? What kind of responses might you get? And how can you tell whether that's a good response that's moving you towards a good working alliance or away from it, which would require another intervention? Yeah, so what responses might you get? Great, Danielle. So I feel anxious all the time. Okay, that might be one response that you could get. Nick, you might get vague answers to an unspecific problem. So, yeah, I'm just not feeling well. Or, yeah, I'm not really sure, but I just thought I'd come in to talk to a therapist. Right. They might, optimal response, a sigh. Okay, you might get a sigh, right, which shows some kind of anxiety coming in. So sometimes patients tell you their problems. Sometimes they start to show you their problems, which we'll start to talk about a little further. Georgina, symptoms, problems, difficulties, fantasies about therapy. Optimally, some kind of introspection too, and realistic expectations. So great. Yeah. I'm really happy when I hear the willing of understanding some inner phenomena. So yeah, fantastic. Yeah, really helpful for us as therapists when we hear the patient has an understanding that they have something inside which is causing their difficulties. And so when we can get that, that helps us know, okay, we'll be able to move forward fairly quickly. List of issues and conflicts with other people. Yeah, so they might just kind of give you any number of issues. They might kind of just tell you about how they're in conflict with other people. And that might be something that they're saying is an internal difficulty, or it might be a way that they just kind of blame their problems on the conflicts they're having with others. Danny, talking about circumstances, blaming others, not quite so good. Exactly. Yeah, so if they just come in, oh yeah, well, I've had a good day and things are going all right, right? Then okay, what are we doing? Where are we going? Or if they say, well, I'm really here because my wife told me to come because she's just been on my case a lot lately. Then yeah, that would be another response that, okay, we're going to need to do some work before we can actually start a therapy. Okay, great. Yeah, so hopefully, as we saw in the chat, hopefully we're getting a clear answer. It's focused, it's emotionally engaged, right? You might get sighs, you might see signs of emotional activation. They're engaged, but they're also open to your help, right? These are all things that yeah, would give you a sense that, okay, we're on the right track to collaborating with somebody on an internal difficulty. If not, we might get avoidance, non-answers, externalizing, blaming, denial, vagueness, somebody who's just flooded with anxiety and doesn't know their problem, or somebody who maybe has problems, but they're not really engaged with their will to work on it with you. So if we get any number of these things, which is actually very common that we get these different responses, we're going to need to do some work then to establish a therapeutic alliance. So I can go into some of the different ways that we can do that. Yeah, Kata, thank you. Can we say that everything is optimal as the response will show us what we need to address next? Exactly. So no patient response is a problem. Every patient response is perfect, as long as we can identify, is this helping me establish a working alliance or is this not? And then, okay, now what do I need to do if it's not to help me get back to a better working alliance? So patients are going to give us whatever patients give us, right? That's not the problem. We just need to have the tools that we need in order to address that. Okay, so why might patients not give us the optimal response, right? Wouldn't it be nice if our patients just gave us the optimal response? Right? If only we had a sign on the door that said, bring in an internal emotional problem that you want to work on with me. But often that doesn't happen. So yeah, why not? Well, when we invite patients to share a problem, we're inviting them to depend upon us for help. Now, depending upon us activates experiences of depending upon others and then being hurt. And this has to do often with their attachment histories, with their family of origin, and with the different injuries that have occurred in those attachment relationships. These attachment relationships and histories then bring up feelings with us. Those feelings, when they're conflicted or not allowed or need to be suppressed, then are going to make a patient anxious. And then a patient's anxiety is going to cause them to bring defenses. And those defenses then are going to prevent dependency, prevent specificity about problems that they're depending upon us to help them with, and prevent collaboration when they're feeling anxious about depending upon us. And that these defenses then begin to create an insecure attachment relationship with the therapist. Okay? So they block clarity on presenting problems and causes, right, which specifically we need for the working alliance. They block collaboration, and ultimately then they block the working alliance. So in order to have a good working alliance, it's not just enough to say, okay, we need to have agreement on problems and we need to have agreement on causes and all that kind of stuff. That's an important factor. But we also have to address the patient's feelings, anxiety, and defenses that arise based on their attachment history in order to solidify the alliance. Now, how do we do this? Well, we invite specifics, we invite detail, we regulate anxiety, we identify detours or defenses, and then we return to a therapeutic focus. Okay. Ultimately, in order to do therapy, we have to have an internal problem that the patient wants to work on right now and with you. If we don't have any of these issues, right, if all of these boxes aren't checked, you really can't do therapy that's based on an internal problem with a patient. So we're looking for all 4 of these things to be in place before we can move forward. Okay, so as we talked about, we can get a clear answer to an internal problem, such as, I've been depressed ever since I lost my father to cancer, right? Okay, that's really helpful. So we know where to go. Or we might just get anxiety, right? The patient might shake, fidget. I don't know, it's just also overwhelming. We might get a defense, right? My wife is the problem, externalizing in some kind of way. So yeah, each response just tells us where we need to help the patient first. Okay. So let's take a look right now at a specific example. This is my favorite example, a clinical example. Okay, so let's move to the next step. Let's assume, right, that the patient gives you a agreement on a problem and a goal. Right, and let's say, as we see here, that they have a problem that they want to work on now and with you. What might you do next? Right, what might you do next to try to move the therapeutic process forward? Okay, so what would you like me to help you with? Well, I've been depressed ever since my father died. Okay, great. Now what do you say? Right, so go ahead again and put some responses in the chat. Great. So yeah, clarify what he means by depressed. Perhaps get a detailed example. Can you tell me more about this issue? Great. Both of those would help. Yeah. So we're specifically looking at what's causing the presenting problems, and how can we get agreement on that with the patient? Right? Because before we know what we need to do in therapy to help the patient with the problem, we need to understand what specifically is causing that. Okay. Now, right, that's getting to this part 2 of getting agreement on the causes of problems and the barriers to progress, because that's really then going to inform, yeah, how we move forward with the work. Okay. So what do we ask to try to understand the cause of the problem together, without just making assumptions in a way that's going to hurt the alliance? What might you ask to understand, to try to get more information on what's causing the problem? So yeah, you're back with the patient. They're depressed. All right, what's causing their depression? Right, and how do I figure that out? Great. Yeah. One question is, how did it all start? Okay, so we can look at the origins of the difficulty and where it began. Danny, tell a specific example. Yeah, can I get a specific example where you became depressed, so that we can try to understand, yeah, how that's affecting you? Okay, great. So yeah, in ISTDP, we inquire about specific details regarding the symptoms or difficulties. So yeah, can you tell me what you mean by depressed, how that affects you, right? What kind of depression are you experiencing? What is depressed like for you? And we also then inquire about, as you've alluded to here in the chat, the specific examples or causes, origins, events in which they have these difficulties. So onset of the problems, frequency, duration, episodes, and we call this intervention really in ISTDP pressure. And that's just ways in which we're trying to invite a focus and trying to get clarity and trying to get to know the patient in a vulnerable way. So specific examples, we ask about feelings in those examples. We ask about timelines and history, first, worst, last, meaning what's the first time you got depressed? What's the worst depressive episode you've had? What's the most recent depressant episode that you've had? And then we monitor the patient's reactions as we gather more information about specifics. And this is all part of getting clarity then on what's causing those presenting problems. Okay. So as we do that, as we're inquiring about specific examples, as we're inquiring about origins, triggers, all those kinds of things, we're starting to get clarity, or we hope that that will help us start to get clarity on what's causing the issues. Now, again, let's think together. What kind of responses might you get when you ask, yeah, if, for example, with depression, tell me about the depression. When did that start for you? Or can we look at a most recent example where you were depressed so that we can see what might be happening there? If you ask those things, what kind of response might you get? And again, what's the optimal response that you're looking for that's telling you, okay, we've gotten more clarity. Now we can move this therapeutic journey ahead with a solid working alliance in place. Okay. So yeah, what responses do you typically get? Yeah. Tell me more about your depression. Yeah, what might you get? Or can you tell me a specific example of a time you became depressed? Yeah, what response might you get from the patient? Great, so you might get a recent problematic situation in relation to the problem, or they start with the beginning. When did it start in their opinion? Okay, great, so you might get a really specific example, either recently or in the past. Yeah, and that would then help. You might also get something that feels important to the client and they can relate to it emotionally. Okay, good. So some important emotional event. So for example, it all started when I lost my father to cancer. And then they begin to start to get teary in the office with you. Okay, great. Yeah, that's going to be really helpful in terms of you then being able to explore, yeah, what's happening there, what's happening inside of them as they look at this, and what kinds of emotional reactions do they have, and then, yeah, how might that be contributing to their difficulties? Okay, so you might get, again, vagueness, detours, defenses against closeness. They don't want to tell you. It's too painful to go there. I don't want to talk about that. I don't really know when it started. I don't know. I've always been this way. Or I just don't really think it's going to be any use to look at that. Right? You might get any number of responses. But what's optimal, what you're looking for in order to move forward, is specific information, specific memories, which illuminate the problem and its causes, including, if possible, a here and now demonstration of the problem that both the patient and the therapist can see. Okay, so this is where, yeah, it all went back to when my father passed away, and then they begin to get tearful. Okay, great. Fantastic. You're seeing that live in the moment now that you can explore that in greater detail. Right, and this is, yeah, Danny's comment there, some kind of activation that confirms we're moving in a good direction. So they might say, oh yeah, it happened when I was a kid. Okay, can you tell me more about that and what happened there? Right, you might need to inquire more, but if they say, yeah, and they are emotionally moved as they share something with you, yeah, then that gives you indication that you're on the right track. Okay, so here are some examples, right? A man with depression, following episodes of abuse, says that, yeah, these are situations in which I became angry. And then as he's describing those, he becomes self-critical and then starts to get depressed. Okay, so yeah, great. Then we can kind of start to see, okay, he's having these situations in which anger is getting triggered, But then as he talks about that, he begins to kind of beat himself up. And then he starts to look more depressed in the office as he's describing this. Great. If a patient gives you that, then you can start to put together a little bit more clearly what's causing their depression. Another example might be, yeah, I've been anxious ever since a very specific trauma. And then, yeah, can we take a look at that? No, I don't want to look at that. It makes me too anxious. Okay, so now you're getting some information about anxiety and avoidance of the trauma that is maintaining the difficulties. Or if a man is lonely and isolated, he's vague with you, he's avoiding specifics, he's kind of crossed arms, crossed legs, looking away, not really relating to you or connecting with you, ruminating emotionally. Okay, if you're seeing that in his responses, then you might be able to put together, oh, maybe the reason he's lonely and isolated is because he tends to keep emotional distance from people, right? Those would be examples of real here and now demonstrations of the problems that give us a lot more clarity on the causes. And this is where in ISTDP, we're wanting to ask the patient, hey, why do you think this is happening to you? Where do you think this is coming from? Where did this start? But the patients often aren't going to be able to know. And so that's where it's our job to really monitor these different anxiety responses, defense responses, and feeling responses to then start to be able to put together with the patient what might be contributing to their difficulties. Okay. So just so that we're clear on our end, because in order to help that be put together for the patient, we have to be able to put that together ourselves. So let's just talk really quickly about what causes presenting problems. Okay, so relational ruptures and traumas trigger complex feelings towards caregivers, okay? They might make us angry, and yet we might also love them. Now, if we have these different mixed feelings, we can sometimes get anxious about those mixed feelings. And our patients can then get, or our parents can then get anxious about those mixed feelings as well. And that can cause them to become reactive to the child. So in order to regulate the parents' anxiety, right, we or children use defenses to then hide those feelings and protect the relationship. All right. And then these defenses are our strategies to try to maintain a relationship and an attachment with a parental figure who's having a hard time with our emotions. And that what we've seen is that within 12 months of age, oftentimes these attachment patterns are already established. And you can, look at the research in terms of you can see a child at 12 months of age, then predicting their attachment status at 18 years of age. So you see kind of some of these patterns become entrenched often fairly early on in life. And so if they learn these patterns early to hide feelings, right, to suppress their feelings, then they automatically or unconsciously or unintentionally will begin to hide them in the office with you. So in the past, these help them solve and resolve a relationship, but in the present, they actually cause their presenting problems and symptoms, right? Like the rumination and distancing, the anxiety, or beating themselves up when they have their feelings in a way that makes them depressed. These cause their presenting problems, they cause elevated levels of anxiety, and they can really impair relationships. So some specific examples of how that might play out. So as a child, you might be angry with your parent. If your parent then spanks you, then you feel it's dangerous to have my anger towards my parent. I might get spanked. So then you start to get anxious every time you have anger towards your parent, right? And then you might turn that anger against yourself in order to protect mom's feelings, right? Which then also protects you because, yeah, then you're not getting spanked. Or you might be sad as a child, and then your dad might say, well, I'll give you something to cry about, right? Or be a man, right? Or one of these other messages. And now that's going to make me anxious about my sadness. So then I'm going to need to hide it from my father in order to protect myself, but also in order to protect him. So now again, later in life, in our relationships or in the therapy, when these feelings and anxiety rise, we're going to use defenses to try to deal with those feelings. And that it's those defenses that in ISTDP we're looking for that cause their presenting problems. And that if we can identify the defenses that are functioning in the moment with you, then we can help them get clarity on what's actually causing their difficulties. So some of you have maybe seen this. This is an ISTDP schematic that just helps us orient to these different patterns and processes in the client. So a client might have feelings, that those feelings then might make them anxious, and then the anxiety will cause them to use defenses, which then push those anxiety-provoking feelings down. Okay, and so we're looking at these defense and anxiety patterns, right? And then looking for the feelings that are underneath. And that they can do this both in the past, and then often then they repeat this in their current life, and they repeat this with you. And so we begin to get clarity on how they're relating to us and how that then informs, right, how they might be relating to other people. Okay, so in summary, as we inquire about the patient's presenting problems, we find out what their symptoms are and the emotional events that triggered them. Then, when we explore those emotional events, their triggers, the origins, their current examples, we begin to find out a patient's triangle of conflict, or what happens when they have feelings in a relationship, where their anxiety pathways go, and then what defenses they use, as well as then how those defenses are connected to their presenting problems and symptoms. And so we're not only seeing that in terms of their description of current or past examples, but we're also seeing that in how they relate to us. So as we saw with that previous case, we saw how the patient was relating to the therapist and how that might cause them to have difficulties of ignoring their problems, denying their problems, or using substances to kind of numb out and block out problems, as opposed to being able to face them head on. Okay, so this is how we can get a lot of confidence about what's actually contributing to the difficulties. So a note on how we diagnose this. The process for this in ISTDP is called psychodiagnosis. This pattern of exploring feelings and examples and seeing what happens live as we do that. And that this can be a lot better than just what's your clinical diagnosis? Oh, you have major depression. Okay, great. Because major depression doesn't actually tell us the cause of the problem, right? Major depression just tells us the symptoms, but it doesn't help us really get at the cause. And so this way of assessing these different patterns gives us a lot more clarity on what's actually happening, and we can observe that in the here and now in a way that gives us a lot more accuracy in terms of those causes. And then depending on how they respond, how quickly they can own a problem, how high their anxiety is, how much they can collaborate with us, that tells us how quickly and efficiently therapy can proceed. And so really what our intent is with ISTDP is to move as efficiently and rapidly as possible, never rushing the process, but maintaining a focus and trying to move forward in a very efficient way. And this helps us keep treatments from being unnecessarily prolonged when a patient's defenses are, dragging the treatment all over the place. Okay. All right. So feel free to put questions in the chat as they come up. Otherwise, I'll just keep moving forward so that we can finish this element and then hit some more specific video examples. Okay. So it's really important in ISTDP that as we're developing these conceptualizations of the patient's problems, that we actually find ways of getting the patient to see those patterns and to agree with those patterns. Okay, so how might we do that? How might we take what we conceptualize as we're doing our psychodiagnosis? How might we then help the patient see those patterns so that we can then get agreement with the patient on how their problems are being created by their defenses and patterns, right? Because it's not enough for us to just say, oh, you're depressed because you turn anger against yourself. So let's look at your anger towards other people. right? Because the patient might say, well, that's not really what's happening for me. And why would I do that if that's not what's happening with me? So yeah, how can we talk collaboratively, right, with our patients to be able to help figure this out? So in ISTDP, here's what we do. We identify and we clarify. These are the main ways in which we help a patient see their defenses. Okay? A patient can't stop a problem that they can't see, and a patient won't stop a problem that they don't think is hurting them. So in ISTDP, identification, right, is how we help a patient see the problem, and clarification is how we help them see how it's hurting them. Okay, so here are some examples of that. You might say to a patient, do you see that when you talk about anger, you start to get weepy and depressed? Do you notice that too? Could that be a way that you internalize your anger, leading to depression symptoms? How would you put that in your own words? Okay, based on the patient responses, then we can tell, are we in agreement? Do they see that too? Or yeah, are they seeing it a totally different way? You might say, I'm noticing feelings and anxiety in you while you talk about your mother, but you seem not to notice. Is that something you're used to doing? Ignoring your feelings and anxiety. How do you think that affects you when you ignore your feelings and anxiety in this way? Okay, that might be another way that you do it. Okay. Now again, right, question for you. What are you looking for with this? When you identify and clarify, what are you then looking for that tells you, okay, we're ready to move forward? What responses might you get when you identify, clarify, the defenses that the patient's using? Go ahead and raise your hand again or put it in the chat. Yeah, you might get agreement. Okay, we're good. Let's move ahead. You might get, I never thought about it that way. Okay, great. Yeah, tell me about that. What do you think? You might get denial, right? You might get compliance or defiance, right? So, sure, yeah, that's probably right. Or you might get, nah, that's not what happens, right? Okay, yeah, can we keep looking at this until we figure out what's going on? And yeah, Martin, not just a yes, but an elaboration. So yes, oh, that totally happens. Yeah, that happened the other day with my wife too. Yeah, I totally did that exact same thing. Right, yeah, just like Marietta's saying, maybe examples that support that hypothesis. So yeah, some way of elaborating or adding, that's telling you, okay, yeah, it seems like we're getting agreement. So yeah, we're looking for emotionally engaged insights. We're looking for ahas. We're looking for some kind of emotional response like anxiety, sighs, rise in hope, rise in motivation, rise in conflict, and some greater sense of collaboration. And as we listed some of the defenses that might show up. So with each step in this process, you'll need to handle those detours or circle back around to get more data until you and the patient are both in agreement and you're ready to move forward. And you really have to have a shared hypothesis about the cause of the problems and what might you be able to do to bring about a cure before you can move forward to test those hypotheses together. Okay, so this is really what needs to be established first. Now, once you get agreement on the causes, or at least agreement on the hypothesis of the causes, then you need to move to getting agreement on the therapeutic tasks. Okay, so what specifically are we going to do in treatment to help you address the causes of your problems? Okay, so what might you do next, right, to move towards a therapeutic task? Let's say you have agreement on the problems, you have agreement on the cause. What's next? What might you do to, start to move towards a therapeutic task? What might you say to the patient? yeah, how could you take the problem, the causes, and then propose a task, yeah, to move the therapy forward. Okay, how about this? Yeah, for this, say, depressive client or the detached client, for example, would you like to try holding off the thoughts that you have about this so that we can focus on the feelings that you have inside? And would you like to share those feelings with me so we can see if that helps you feel less lonely? Okay. Or with the trauma case, yeah, would you like us to help you face the memories and feelings you've been avoiding about the incident so you no longer have to live in fear of them? Yeah, for depression, would you like to work together to help you tolerate your anger in relationships without getting depressed or attacking yourself? And can we look at specific examples where you felt angry and help you tolerate that physically in your body? Or, yeah, anxiety, do we agree that if we carefully attend to your anxiety in the moment, we can help you identify the triggers for it and help you learn to regulate it? Yeah, and that, as Martin's saying, yeah, you're clarifying then what you and the patient, what you and the client might do to actually address their difficulties together. Ultimately, it's going to depend on specifically what their problem is, but it's going to involve paying careful attention to their anxiety and feelings in the present moment with an eye towards how the past is getting triggered. And then it's going to help them turn and identify, turn against the defenses that you identify that are standing in the way of their presenting problems, standing in the way of their feelings, right? That this is ultimately what it's going to involve. But then you and the patient are going to identify together based on what's emerging, specifically how you do that. Okay, so let's turn. Great. So you saw me inquire about problems. You saw me focus on a specific example, which was the therapeutic relationship with me and the anxiety that's showing up there. You saw me inquire about, yeah, is the anxiety about the appointment and coming into the appointment, right? And she says, well, no, not really consciously, but I did wake up with anxiety. And then I thought, yeah, oh yeah, the appointment. So, and then, yeah, you saw me then propose a therapeutic task, right? Which was, yeah, would it make sense that something unconsciously is getting triggered, right, related to the appointment? And that, yeah, then should we explore together whatever these unconscious things are that might be triggering your anxiety, right? And then, yeah, we saw with the patient that she said, yeah, that's what I want to do. There's a lot of unconscious things going around in there that I think I need to address. And then she reiterated, yeah, I think my body's just kind of running the show. Okay. So yeah, we tried to put these pieces together, and overall, yeah, within the first few minutes, we've gotten clarity on a problem, clarity on an example, and proposing a therapeutic task that will then allow us to move forward. Okay, so that's some ways in which it often plays itself out. So any questions or responses there before we move on to another, just few slides and then another example? Yeah, please describe a situation. So, okay, you can ask, yeah, can you tell me a situation where you find yourself getting some kind of unconscious activation that makes you anxious? That might be one way you move forward next. Yeah. Okay, great. So let's move forward, and then we can, yeah, see one more case. So yeah, after you get agreements on problems, causes, tasks, you need to know, in order to have a good working alliance, what the roles are. Okay, and just so that we can kind of move forward, right? Here are some of the roles that we might play. Okay, a patient, their role to pay attention to, bring examples of difficulties, work on their difficulties between sessions. Ultimately, it's going to involve them turning against defenses, facing what they fear, and feel what they've avoided. That's ultimately in ISTDP what the patient's asked to do. And then as a therapist, our job is to invite a focus, maintain a focus, invite collaboration, invite specificity, invite examples, and then invite feelings, experience, and expression of those feelings in those examples, and then assessing which defenses are standing in the way of not only the working alliance, but also what might be causing the patient's difficulties. Okay, so these are all some of the roles that we play in this work. And overall, just in a nutshell, ISTDP involves this kind of simple process. So there's a lot of schematics out there on here's what the ISTDP process looks like. Some of them are terribly complicated. Some of them are fairly straightforward. But this has been the most helpful just summary for me that helps us maintain a working alliance and also moves us forward in an ISTDP process. So basically, patient describes an internal problem. They and you explore a specific example, or they enact it with you for you to evaluate. They identify their feelings. They experience their feelings physically, and then they express their feelings in a way that is curative and healing for them. Ultimately, that's the therapeutic journey in a nutshell. And then the therapist helps the patient identify and overcome their anxiety and defense patterns at each of these stages, because anxiety and defense patterns are going to happen at each of these stages. And that in so doing, yeah, we resolve the factors that cause the patient's difficulties and symptoms. Okay, so that's a summary. So unless there's any other comments, I'm going to pull up another case. Feel free to ask comments. So I'm going to pull up one more case so that we can see yeah, how we orient to this again. Just to give you some more examples of how you might do this. And as we watch the case, go ahead and, again, walk through this process yourself. Okay, so ask yourself, do I have a presenting problem? Do I have a specific example of that problem? Do I have clarity on the cause? Do I have clarity on what we need to do in terms of the therapeutic task? Do I have agreement on that with the patient? Okay, so ask yourself these questions as we watch this, and you'll see kind of how I orient to that. And so what I want you to see here is that she you can see her start to get a bit tearful as she describes the hope that, oh, now I know what my issue really is. Because coming into the session, she was just flooded and anxious, and but now we know, oh, now I know what the issue is. And now I can have some hope because I'm actually seeing a path forward to be able to address those difficulties. And wow, I actually know, right, therapy can mean all kinds of different things, but now I know what therapy here actually means. Because it means very specifically, right, that I'm going to try to get in touch with my feelings and differentiate myself in a healthy way, yeah, from my partner. And oh, wow, and I now can see that we can do that. And that when we do that together, I can see how that's going to directly address the problems that I've been having the most problems and struggle with. So what I want to highlight is just that this actually shows you some of the therapeutic benefit that even just establishing a working alliance with your patients gives you. So even beyond all the things that we do in ISTDP later, which is experiencing an expression of emotion and breakthroughs into the unconscious and links to the past and insights about the origins of their difficulties and all these things, all that stuff's good. But that, yeah, all you have to do at the beginning is just get a lot of clarity with the patient, make sure you're on the same page, make sure that you're on the same page about what their difficulties are, what's causing their difficulties, and what you and the patient together can do to benefit them in the therapy. And that already you're going to see therapeutic benefits, you're going to see a rise in hope, you're going to see a decrease in anxiety, you're going to see an improvement in mood, a lowering of depression. You're going to see all these different things, increased buy-in in the treatment, increased hope and satisfaction with the treatment. All these things are going to be a natural byproduct of just that simple focus from the beginning. Okay, so I hope this gives you some information, hope this gives you some practical tools that no matter what kind of therapy you use, what kind of approach you use, you'll be able to take these fundamentals of the working alliance and be able to apply them to your patients in a way that, yeah, helps you be more effective and more satisfied with your work. So Thank you so much. So we'll pause. We just have a little bit of time for a few questions or comments, and then I think yeah, there's some announcements as well about next time. So any brief questions, yeah, that I can answer? Yeah. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like, or put it in the chat. Martin, can the blocking of the defenses happen too early or fast in therapy? Are there any risks to this? Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the big risks in ISTDP, in my opinion, is jumping right to defense work, jumping right to pressuring a person to have their feelings and all that kind of stuff. That's why it's so important to me to bring this talk to you to prevent some of those growing pains in learning ISTDP. Because yeah, you don't want to block defenses or be really confrontive with defenses until the patient sees exactly why you're doing it, what you're doing, and how it's related to helping them with their problems. Then when you interrupt and say, yeah, hey, do you notice that right now you're getting anxious, right? And can we take a look together at what you're feeling underneath? Then they're going to know why you're asking that, right? And it's going to seem like a way that you're helping them as a way in which you're just criticizing them or anything like that. Yeah, any other questions or reflections? Great, Martin, thanks. Okay, well, if there's not anything else, then shall we turn it over to you, Kata, for a few, sounds like announcements for next steps?
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. I think it was extremely inspiring, and I think we could understand much better how to build good foundations to a therapeutic work and getting agreement and hope. And I could say how to build a more secure attachment with our patients. So
Exactly.
that was really, really eye-opening. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. And that's what I just wanted to highlight is, how these defenses and patterns would create an insecure attachment in a way that would really prevent collaboration in a helpful way. So just maintaining a working alliance is how you ensure that you have better attachments with your patients. So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to bring this.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.